Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. Very much looking forward to take you through the news and developments in fintech and hope to educate you a bit and spark your curiosity, of course. My name is Ginsel, and I've got a very nice co-host today, which is Emanuele Francioni, founder and tech lead at Dusk Network. Good morning, Emanuele.
Good morning, Don.
Very nice to have you here on the show. I think it's really Dusk is, I think, at the center of some of the cool developments we see happening in the fintech world. So I'm very curious to take on the conversation with you and see where things are heading for you, and hope to give some interesting insights to our audience today about everything that's going on in the world of decentralized finance, crypto, and of course everything else that's going on in fintech.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so thanks that you could join. First of all, tell us a bit about you. What's your background? How did you end up here?
So we have only half an hour, right? So I'll try to if I know that I can be awfully verbose at times, so I'll try to keep it short and concise. So I have roughly 22 years of development. Oh, geez, I'm really old. Of development experience. So I have been in a lot of different industries, all linked to software and technology. I started with avionics. I landed here in the Netherlands, I believe right now 14 years ago, because I started to work for TomTom, and I became the director of research and development there. And then in 2012, I felt my calling to become an entrepreneur, and the calling also to just evolve my career around blockchain. So fast forward 2018, end of 2017, that is when I co-founded Dusk Network, and in short, this is roughly my pedigree.
Tell a bit more about Dusk. So what are you working on at the moment? If people don't know Dusk, what is it about?
Well, I would say that the mission of Dusk is actually quite simple, and it is empowering users to exert absolute control over the assets that they own. Okay, yeah. And this is Dusk mission. It is quite simple, and probably a little apophthegm could explain a little better this mission. So I love to make an example and to tell a little story which involves my nephew. I have 3 nephews. I also have 1 kid, but I don't really talk about fintech or blockchain with him because he's 4. Give him another couple of years. But one thing is, when I try to explain what I do to my nephew, then the simple question that I have for them to let them understand, because blockchain is actually quite simple to get once you get it, is essentially the following question. And the question is, right now you have a bank account, right? And your bank account is digital. Is something that it is in a digital form. Nobody exchanges banknotes anymore. Cash is so 1995. And so one of the questions that I have for my nephew is, can you download your money on a USB key? And my nephew just the first time that I tried to explain to him, he thought about it a little bit, and he said, actually, no, I cannot. I mean, I can see it on my phone, but I cannot really download my money. I mean, also, what does it mean? I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. But if you think about it, right, so back in the 50s, in the 60s, up to the 90s, everybody had banknotes in their wallet, assets that they owned, right? And the reason why we don't do that anymore is because the digital world is essentially so much more convenient. But in the digital world, you cannot always own your assets. Why? Because it is extremely convenient to copy them. The digital world essentially just solved scarcity, right? Which is something that the NFT are trying to
Resolve. Yeah.
But yeah, so you cannot be allowed you couldn't be allowed on Web2 essentially to just manage your own digital assets. You cannot control, you cannot own your digital asset. You need to essentially trust a third party to do it.
And so how do you do that with Dusk now? How do you facilitate that?
Well, if we make a parallel from with money, for example, Dusk doesn't only aim to do that for money, but it tries to aim to do that with assets, any kind of assets, like, for example, financial assets. Just giving the capability to the users to own and to exert control over their assets, and their assets can also be their digital identity, can also be their securities, and in order to do so, how we do that essentially is through a blockchain protocol, so through a decentralized ledger, to a decentralized DLT. That's essentially what Dusk Network is all about. What is our mission?
And so how, let's say, because I think that's a really broad tool set that you actually provide, and how do you then in the end actually get this in use with end users, right? So do you work with partners that use your blockchain basically to create these tools, or how does that work?
Well, from from a practical perspective, essentially what we aim to do and how we are getting there are intertwined, right? So what we aim to do is to basically provide any kind of user with a wallet, and essentially to be able to mount on this wallet different kind of applications. Now, these applications are what in a blockchain world you would refer to as smart contracts. And how we are getting there is definitely through not only a set of partnership, but also to try and translate the legal standards that do regulate certain particular asset. We are trying to translate it into a technological standard, which is this collection of different tools, as you rightfully call them. And from a technical perspective, they are called standards, in fact, smart contract standards. And within Dusk Network, we have been developing different kind of standards. Most prominently, the one that we are the most proud of is something which is called the XSC standard, which stands for Confidential Smart Contract Standard, with which we hope to provide automated compliant to security regulation for the issuance and trading of regulated assets, in this case, securities.
Okay. And so do you think that's, let's say, that in any case sparks with me the question whether, let's say, one of the debates there was always around blockchain-based solutions that, once the data is available to everyone, in theory, you run into privacy issues and potential security issues indeed. And that's, for example, what these kind of protocols are aiming to solve?
Yeah, that is entirely correct. In fact, actually, Dusk Network is the only blockchain and smart contract platform that I know of, which essentially is private, or has a privacy first approach. Now, the interesting thing is the fact that whenever you are talking about privacy, a lot of people start to be doubtful about the regulatory compliance, right? Why? Because if you have complete privacy, you have complete anonymity. So what does stop bad actors to, for example, to use the network and do something that is illegal? Whitewashing money, these kind of things. And in order to solve that, because in order to provide complete control to our users, it is provide complete control within the confines of the law. I use specifically the word standard to implement a legislative standard for security. Now, the legislative standard for security I mean, it's obviously very broad, so I'm not going to get into details here. But one thing that it does, it demands two different things, or the fulfillment of two different requirements which feel antithetic. One is privacy. The other one is auditability. And, just the capability of, comply with the KYC, AML, and these kind of things. Fortunately, the advancement in cryptography just handed us the perfect tool to, solve these antitheses, to solve this incongruency. And the tool is zero knowledge technology, the so-called zero knowledge technology.
Mm-hmm.
And zero knowledge cryptography essentially allows for transaction to both be private, but to give a mathematical certainty that this transaction also do comply with certain legislation. I'll give you a very brief example. For example, let's say that we are transacting certain assets that require KYC, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the protocol enforces only KYC'd actors to transact with each other, and will automatically refuse all the transactions that don't belong or are not created by non-KYC people. How? Because people that are included in a KYC list, whitelist, for example, they can prove mathematically, without revealing who they are, and this is the power of zero knowledge technology, their inclusion in that whitelist. So the network, the verifiers of the network, in fact, will validate this proof, again, without having access to the data and to the identity of the people that are transacting, and will essentially either accept or not that transaction in the ledger when all the different requirements for that particular transaction, that particular assets are fulfilled.
I think that's really interesting as well. I think because you see, of course, now that nowadays the crypto industry in general, and through that, of course, a lot of blockchain projects are being debated about whether they're able to support the fight against money laundering, and indeed, for example, do not circumvent sanctions that have been imposed, for example, on Russia at the moment, Belarus. So you actually see that you've got a very good set of tools to be able to comply with these regulations.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to say that it was easy to develop these tools. In fact, we are among the few different kind of blockchains that even after 4 years of development, we just recently launched our test environment. So it took an enormous amount of time to develop these tools, which actually were really too innovative to adopt just willy-nilly. But yes, there is an enormous debate right now around, for example, blockchain propositions, tokens, crypto companies and organizations that are suddenly, under the capable eyes of the regulators because of a lot of things that are happening in Europe. You mentioned one, the sanctions, for example, but there are many others. Recently, for example, there was a vote in the European Parliament to enforce, for example, the KYC procedure on those wallets or those transactions that do hit an exchange, a centralized exchange. And the reason for that is that I believe that regulators, they want to exert control over who is turning their crypto asset into, other kind of assets like fiat money, and exit crypto and entering and off-ramping to fiat. And this obviously is a huge problem for all those protocols out there that have been building on a public ledger that doesn't have the capability of remaining private.
Yep.
And that's an interesting point, because I'm not really talking about privacy here. I'm talking about KYC, right? So why is it important to have privacy and KYC at the same time? Well, in Europe, for example, there is the GDPR, right?
Yep.
The GDPR demand certain companies, in fact, that deal with personal data to comply to a certain set of regulations, to certain requirements. One of which is the capability of deleting this data on request of the users. Now, if you think about a blockchain is essentially an append-only database in its most generic form. So this means that if you have an open ledger, and then suddenly the actors in this open ledger need to be KYC'd, there is a direct link between what is their wallet, which normally is pseudonymous, and their identity. So suddenly all these different kind of network, which are decentralized, or they are incapable of being managed by anyone, by definition, they suddenly need to comply with the GDPR. Now, those that are completely private and also provide KYC possibilities, well, then they are exempted from the GDPR, because essentially it's anonymous. Anonymity is, in fact, one of the requirements not to fall under the GDPR. So suddenly we have decentralized ledger that are not controlled, that where data cannot be erased. They are against censorship, but they need to comply with the GDPR, so they need to be able to provide capabilities to erase data, which is very difficult for them to do. So we were lucky enough to foresee this kind of situation back in 2018, and this is what we have been working on ever since.
Okay. And is it easy to convince regulators about this? For example, I mean, are you sometimes struggling to explain this to parties that are basically new to this game, and also, but basically have also a very strong say in whether you can actually go to market?
That is a very good question. So essentially, what we are trying to do at the very beginning is to have an approach which is completely regulatory friendly, right? So one of these approaches is to have very close relationship with regulated entities like MTFs. For example, we have very strong ties with an MTF here in the Netherlands, MPEX. But not only. And the interesting part is basically to get an incremental approach, and always to be mindful of regulation. For example, one of the regulations that is very interesting for us was the DLT, the new, I believe is called. I don't want to say something imprecise, but it is a new regulation which allows for MTF to ask for an exemption for certain assets, for example, to be tracked through a decentralized DLT, aside from a CSD, a central security depository, for example. And this fits perfectly our strategy, because we can just introduce our protocol side by side with the established incumbents, and essentially prove through in the usual sandbox approach that regulators, especially here in the Netherlands, follow, that effectively our protocol provides exactly the same kind of convenience and exactly the same kind of requirements than centralized one, but without the need for third-party intermediation or third-party brokerage.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's quite an achievement, I think, so far. So what kind of parties are you mostly working with now? So what kind of customers should we be thinking about? What kind of places can people basically run into products that are based on your systems?
Well, essentially, I was talking about that with my partners yesterday. and we had a very, very interesting, gathering. Also, because here in Amsterdam there are many different blockchain projects, because there are two events that are going on right now. One is Dev Connect, the other one is ZK Summit. So interestingly, we were talking about that. Essentially, our approach is we are a protocol, we are not a company, so it's not exactly like that, but our approach is a B2B2C, right? What we want is to create a set of standards, or what we put forward are a set of standards or smart contract standards that, other businesses or established institution users a more convenient way to, just do things that normally they would require these institutions' intermediation. I mean, one of the examples is the ETF example. So ETF providers, their mission is to create basket products, right? But when they create a basket of regulated assets like equity or stocks, then they also, these stocks are not only as a passive asset, they do require certain management, certain administration. For example, voting in the assembly of shareholders in the biannual investor assembly. And for a basket of hundreds of different assets, then this is a burden for the ETFs. Now, suddenly, if this ETF basically, or if they could offload these operations to their own investors through a self-custodian wallet that they have, then the ETF provider essentially regain the capability of focusing on their core business, rather than just doing all these different kind of application, and their investors gain control over the assets that they invested in. This is just one of the examples. There are many others like that. We can talk about, for example, private equity marketplace. We can talk about a bulletin board. All these things, they are all sort of smart contracts. They are building blocks that we provide to our institution. In some cases, we also are, the followers of the old adage, eat your own dog food.
Yeah.
Because we aim to...
always tasteful. Yeah.
Because we aim to provide a good UX. So, and we also do want to be the first users of our own protocol. I mean, if there was a platform that could provide, automated regulatory compliance and privacy and, explicit acceptance of transaction, for example, when we started, then we didn't have to create Dusk Network. We would simply just create the applications that we had in our mind, which at that time was, for the so-called security token or the implementation of security token assets, which are essentially dematerialization of securities on the blockchain, for which we see a lot of opportunity, because there is a disconnect between the crypto finance, or what is called DeFi, and TradFi, so traditional finance. We see finance as finance. We don't see these two things as different. And our first application or set of application, the ones that we had in mind, was to reconcile the two. But before doing that, then we needed to create a platform that would allow us to do so. So yes.
So basically, maybe piggybacking on your remark there on DeFi, I think, because let's say you say that basically you're one of the only platforms that actually has the capabilities to be compliant with all these different requirements, from privacy to up to basically being regulatory compliant with central bank standards or other requirements that are more financially driven. That's what you would expect that DeFi really needs to be able to really take off, right? So how do you see that that's going in the market? Because I think indeed there are some pioneers that are working on this, but not all still fits the traditional way of working of finance, including all the regulatory requirements. I would say
absolutely. So Here is where we get into kind of a interesting territory, because I am a big proponent of decentralized application, but I also do see a lot of misinformation, especially right now that there are many different initiatives in Amsterdam, and these are occasions to get a little bit of pulse of the entirety of the market. So what I hear over and over again, and this is something that worries me a lot, is a stance which I feel is completely incorrect, and it's the following. I heard, for example, in a panel a couple of days ago, somebody that was talking about the regulatory compliance, or the role of regulators in DeFi, as those of followers, right? So what he said, I think literally, was that regulators are very slow, and they will have no choice but to adapt of the exponential growth that at the moment DeFi protocols see, both in terms of adoption and technological development. And I do believe that is absolutely not the case, not by far. We had, because of what we try to do, we have many interaction with regulators, and regulators are actually very knowledgeable about DLTs, very knowledgeable about the technology, to an extent which surprised me and keeps surprising me. I mean, these guys are no dumps. Their efforts and their approach, which is a very rightful approach, according to me, to regulation, is to provide continuity with the current laws. Instead there is this complete disconnect on these DeFi protocols, which try essentially to circumvent regulation, or rather ignore the very good capability of regulators to regulate, to provide this continuity, this consistency with new assets, because crypto are largely new assets, but in some cases there is a lot of overlap with other kind of assets.
And, no, in most cases they will be used like we used other assets, right? So that's why I think also you would argue it's a very fair argument to say they should comply with the animals, with the rules for the animals they look like, right?
Yeah, indeed.
And that's, I think that's quite a struggle I see for quite some developers that think they have invented something completely new, but if you would actually look at the actual use by customers, they all have, they're either debt, their equity, they're a promise to buy something, to sell something, right? So it's and these are all legal, from a legal perspective, they're all things we're familiar with, and therefore they would need to comply with the same rules.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the form can be a little different. The context can be a little different. I mean, if we are talking about utility tokens and we are talking about security tokens, these kind of things, obviously we are talking about two different things. What is gas, for example, to create to trigger a smart contract call? But so there is a certain difference, but not that tangible of a difference would invoke a complete new overhaul of a different segregated section of finance. This is wishful thinking. And what is going to happen, and what is already happening, is the fact that all these kind of protocols, they will have to they will have to comply. And if until I mean, if you believe in a future in which some of the crypto will basically just completely replace money and become legal tender everywhere, then probably there might be a way to work around that. But regardless, in that case, regulators will simply just stop regulating or stop trying to regulate the crypto aspect, and they will start to regulate the acquisition aspect. So they will probably regulate products a little.
But it's what you see now as well, right? I think in the end, they don't have, most regulators don't have much grip on crypto itself, but they can talk to the exchanges and everywhere where it touches on fiat or other way, basically enters into their domain.
That is exactly what
I'm happy to actually hear that you're so positive about the regulators. Maybe because I think we're almost running out of time. Time flies. What's your ambition with Dusk going forward? What could we expect from you the coming years? As a final question.
Well, yes. So for what concerns the coming years, like I said, we are in our testnet phase at the moment. We want to accelerate on testing all the different aspects of the network and to roll out the complete network and go after security. The security-based proposition first, but this doesn't mean that we are not going to, just go for different other assets at the same time. I have also quite an interest in self-sovereignty, and we are exploring that as well. So what I would say right now is that we keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible with zero-knowledge cryptography. And that is one of the focus, and completing the platform and rolling out the pilots that we already have secured with some of the institutions that we collaborate with. I see these as being a good focus point and a goal for this year.
Super. Well, thanks, Emanuele. I think it's really great to hear about this, and I think you're on a very interesting track there to basically bridge the head between the blockchain world and crypto world and the regulatory compliant financial services industry, which just requires quite high standards. So I think it's really interesting to keep track of how you're going to facilitate basically both developments over the coming period.
It has been absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to more talks like this.
Looking forward to that as well, Emanuele. Keep us posted, and looking forward to speak to you again. For everyone who listened in, thank you for joining. Enjoy your weekend, and looking forward to see you on the next Flash Friday. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.